Hi, this is Bill Kenower for Author Magazine, and this month I spoke with journalist, podcaster, and now author Anna Sale about her new book, Let's Talk About Hard Things. Anna is the host of the very popular and award-winning podcast Death, Sex, and Money, and we talked about, well, how to have hard conversations and what it took for her as an author to be able to draw her own conclusions, to be able to state clearly what she learned in having all these conversations, and finally, about the gift of revising. Enjoy. Well, Anna, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
It's my pleasure. This is good. You know, I don't often get to talk to people who are writers and who have all these conversations with people, which is what I spend a lot of time doing. If our viewers don't know, Anna hosts a fabulous podcast called, I want to get the order right, Death, Sex, and Money. That's the order. Okay, Death, Sex, and Money. And you've been doing it for how long has that been going?
The show's actually celebrating its 7th birthday this month. Yeah.
Hey, okay, that's great. And you're still liking it, still enjoying it.
Yeah.
But you were a journalist. Before you began doing, you cut your teeth as just a professional in the world of journalism. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. News.
And was your eye on radio journalism specifically, or just on wherever you could do what you do?
Yeah, I've always worked in public radio. I think I came to journalism first as a fan of audio, more than a fan of sort of the breathlessness and adrenaline that comes from covering news, which I got hooked to after.
Right.
But I've always worked in public radio.
So the podcast starts, if I understand, you get divorced, and it baffles you because it wasn't one of these big contentious, like, you cheated on me, you son of a bitch, and we're getting at. It was just one of these things. What's happening? It kind of falls apart, right? Yeah. And you were at a loss for words.
Yeah.
And you didn't. And so that was the sort of inspiration behind wanting to talk to people about stuff that you think isn't talked about. You feel just isn't talked about.
Yeah. I wanted to, I came out of, I was married when I was in my 20s. I'm turned 30. My first marriage falls apart. And, the thing that sort of powered my journalism in a newsroom was like, I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to shout it at a press conference. I'm going to find the document and I'm going to get the answer.
Right.
And then in my personal life, I was in this sort of like, all of a sudden, this time of like feeling like there was no gravity. I didn't know where I was going, what had happened. And I didn't know even how to talk about it because I didn't have the words. And I found myself so pulled towards conversations with friends or older mentors or family, anyone who would talk to me about their life. I just wanted, what was it like when that happened in your life? Describe that uncertainty and like, what were the small steps that you took to find your footing again? Like that's what I desperately needed to know. And then I found like, when you have conversations about that, it's really interesting.
It is. But you were talking to people beforehand, but you must not have been having these conversations. You were having conversations. You were probably talking about politics. You were probably talking about relationships maybe, but you weren't having these conversations, right? Yeah. So there's just a different thing that happens.
Yeah. And I think I had to give myself permission because I was a journalist who was going to prove that I could like be the best journalist there was.
And what does that mean? What does that mean to be the best journalist? And what does that mean?
That meant for me when I started out, I looked around and all the men.
Was it mostly guys? Was it really?
It was, still in my market. I started out in West Virginia and they all had like, reporters' notebooks in their back pockets constantly.
Right.
And they, when they asked a question, they leaned in and then they sort of like barked it at you, like that was their way.
All right.
And they did incredibly important investigative reporting. And I think for me, I thought if I can do that, I should be doing that kind of journalism. These matters of the
investigative,
heart,
get to the bottom of this. Right.
And I think I felt a little bit like being curious about people's personal lives was,
soft. Yeah.
not important,
Not hard.
And in fact, it's, I think, for me, the most important.
Yeah.
This is how we build our lives, what our relationships are, how we make choices, what our values are.
I agree, 100%. And so you started the podcast. You pitched it to your boss, and that he or she said, "Yeah, do it, and give it a shot." And so, what was that like when you first started doing it? Was it scary? Was it a relief? What was that like at first?
I mean, it was everything. It was, I found that the most important thing that I needed to figure out how to do as an interviewer was to tell the person I was going to be asking these personal questions why I was doing it. So
why? Okay. Why is that?
Because I think, if someone comes at you and is like, "Oh, so I see here, I did some research in your early 30s, your first marriage, you got divorced. Why?"
Just like I just did.
Yeah, which I've written a book about. So you have permission to do that. But for me, I would say something like the beginning of an interview, like, our show, we focus on moments of transition in life. So I might ask you about some personal areas in your life. If you don't want to talk about it, that's okay. But the reason I'm asking is because I think it's to make our listeners feel less alone when they have this happen.
I have learned, and maybe I learned through these the things I've been doing, these interviews, is listening is really the key to conversation. Not talking. I mean, talking, someone's got to talk, but the listening is far more important.
Yeah. And I think, I think about listening as, it's not just listening, because it's also the follow-up conversation.
Question. Yeah.
Like, wait, hang on. I want to make sure I'm hearing you. Like, something I do on the podcast a lot is like, wait, take me back. You made this choice. I want to actually, where were you? Like, tell me the story about
it.
Because then you really, you're actually listening to what I just said.
Hey, it makes a huge difference. I remember the first time I was interviewed on the radio, and this woman, she did a great job. She had read my books, and she had all her questions written down, but I realized she would ask the question, I'd give the answer, and then she'd ask the next question. So I didn't even know if she was listening to my answer, because the next question had nothing to do with the last one.
Yeah.
And I don't write questions down because I don't know what I'm going to say until the person shows up. So I have to listen if there's going to be a conversation. But I didn't realize until I didn't know if she was listening, how hard it was for me to talk in a way. Because where is this going? What effect is that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel that so much. And it makes me picture, when I was first starting out in radio, one of the first lessons you learn when you're trying to just get a soundbite is you don't want to audibly listen, because we call it step on the tape.
Yes.
So I became, when I was first starting in journalism, the most aggressive nodder, like, like my eyes would get huge, like just the way to say, like, keep giving it to me, that I've since had to tone down a little bit, because it's very strange social behavior. But
it is. And when you sat down to write the book, Let's Talk About Hard Things, what did you learn in writing it? Because you've had a lot of these conversations, but writing is always, I've learned for myself and for everyone I know, a process of discovery, even if it's about something that you're intimately familiar with. So what did you learn writing it? What did you discover in talking about, as you said, death, relationships, sex, money, and identity, right? Were those the five?
Yeah, and family. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. I learned, so here's what I chiefly learned as an author that I did not know as an interviewer. As an interviewer, my primary mode is to try to keep peeling back and try to keep asking, being curious. at a certain point as an author, you have to say what you've learned. You have to have a concluding
You do.
statement.
You do. Yes, you
You have
do.
a thesis.
Hopefully, Anna, not every author feels that way, but yes, hopefully.
Oh man. And I found it was very interesting how uncomfortable I felt in that space.
Ah, yeah.
And how much I had, that was where the pushing had to happen for me as a writer, is like, Anna, you are noticing things and learning things and pulling together and synthesizing some conclusions, and it's okay to tell the people what you've learned.
Why was that hard?
I think I
Was it like, who am I to say that, or was it
a
something else?
lot of who am I? A lot of like
Yeah.
just imposter stuff.
Yeah.
And then also kind of like I, as an interviewer, I really love pulling out people's stories and letting them tell me
Yeah.
how they understood their story. And so me layering upon this, like, so let me just pull this out and underline it. Here's the thing. Here's the lesson from this story. That just wasn't a natural. I would skip that paragraph. And then my editor would say, you need to go back and write a paragraph here about what did, why this is in here.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's the part where I had to be like, what are the words for this?
Well, it's good. It's a good book. It's so interesting. Well, it's a subject that I love very much. Meaningful conversations. It's the only kind of conversations I want to have for the most part. The hard ones, I think. All right, but I got one more question for you. Yes, I do. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to finish this sentence. If writing has taught me anything, it's taught me what?
If writing has taught me anything, it has taught me about the gift of revising as you go along.
Interesting. Okay, all right, so it taught you about the gift of revising.
Yeah.
Now, aside from the act of revising, how did it teach you that? Like, what do you mean specifically? Why is that such a gift?
I think it's like, it's sort of, writing I think of as this, especially because I came up in a newsroom environment, it's like this fast, like,
Yeah.
And writing a book has been so much about going back and, wait, is that really what I believe? Is there a better way to say this? And what if I presented this idea before this idea? How does it change things? And how that then can transform the reality you're describing. I really have learned that from book writing, just how magical revising can feel. Also painful sometimes, but also magical.